Welcome back to the Hammer Time Rackets podcast. I am your host, Peter Cipriano, and with me today is John Prenn, former world champion. Welcome, John.
Peter, great to be here.
Good
and
to have you.
I'd like to congratulate you on your podcast, what you've done so far. It's been really a great initiative. It's great listening to some of the old farts reminisce. And I wonder if CNN is going to do any fact checking because we all have different memories of the same event. We all think we're absolutely right, and there's probably some gaps there somewhere. But it's great to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you. So before we start to get into some of the details of all the rivalries and matches and experiences you'd had, one of the really interesting things about you and your family, which I read like on your father's Wikipedia page, is your father was a Davis Cup tennis player in Germany, and I guess it said on his Wikipedia page that he came to the UK after playing tennis. I think it was with the King of Sweden or something like that, and came to the UK. He was the number 6 ranked tennis player in the world, I think that they said. So my first question for you was, your father's a tennis player. How did it come to pass that you wound up becoming a rackets player, and how come you didn't wind up just focusing on tennis?
Well, actually, I did. I tried to become a tennis player. I was obsessed with tennis. My father originally was Russian, and had to leave Russia with his family at the end of the revolution, and ended up in Berlin to finish his education. Then he got into tennis and became became the number 1 player in Germany, way pre-war, and then represented Germany in the Davis Cup. One of his most famous victories was in the deciding rubber of a Davis Cup match against Great Britain, beating Fred Perry.
Big win.
Big win from, he won the first 2 sets, lost the next 2 sets, was 5. He was way down in the final set and won it. Being Jewish, Hitler banned him from representing Germany. And then at that time, the King of Sweden, as you rightly say, was playing on the tennis doubles a little bit, loved tennis, played in some of the tournaments with the top players. And my father told me that basically he said to my father, you should leave Berlin in the next 48 hours.
Wow. And
so he left, being a top, tennis in those days was all amateur. And it was sort of similar a little bit to how rackets is now in terms of it's primarily an amateur game. So he knew a lot of people in the UK, and was helped when he came over here. And I have Wimbledon programs where he's listed as D. Prenn, Germany, D. Prenn, no nationality, D. Prenn, UK, Great Britain. So it's, and he'd never, sorry to answer your question, I was obsessed with playing tennis and trying to be a good tennis player. I played on the circuit for 3 years, just at the time it turned open, and had I had to survive on my prize money, I think I might have bought a pretty cheap bottle of wine in the 3 years that I tried it. But I didn't go to university, and that was my, I guess, university years. And then, so I stopped playing. I thought I was going to do really well in the British under 21 championships. I got to the quarters against the number 2 seed or something, and I thought I had a chance of winning. and I lost 4-4, and I thought, this is not going to happen. I'm not good enough. And I had played rackets at school, and I played the week before going to Harrow, or the 2 weeks before. Norwood Cripps was the professional at Queen's at rackets.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, who had never stepped foot on a rackets court, said, "You've got to try this game. It's so fast." And he loved the sound of a rackets ball hitting a wall. He said, "You just got to, Harrow's got a court. You've got to try it out." So I had about 2 or 3 or 4 lessons with Norwood before I went to Harrow. And so fast forward to when I stopped playing lawn tennis. My birthday's at the end of August. At the under 21, I was 21, and I thought, okay, I've got to go get some form of job. And my first day of work, I walked into Queen's, and Howard Angus was at Queen's.
Yeah.
He didn't really know me very well at all. I hadn't played rackets for a period of 3 years. And he said, "John," I think in those days he was probably world champion. He said, "Would you like a hit?" I thought, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I said, "Sure." So we had a hit. And during this hit, I put my back out. I went up to the change room. I could hardly bend down to put my socks on. Yeah. I thought, if this is work, it's not for me. First day of work. But I really admire Howard for his kindness and encouragement to play with somebody who was pretty useless.
And who were your regular practice partners? Were you practicing and playing with Howard a lot, or was it Charles Hugh Williams, or who were the people that you were training with a lot of the time?
What, in those days?
Yeah.
It was so 21. I started playing a bit. I was playing with Charles and whoever would have a hit, Howard a little sometimes. And yeah, a variety of players.
And I guess one of the things about Howard, and then also Boone had mentioned, obviously they were both, very keen on playing squash, and Howard playing the real tennis. Sounded like Boone was, they're both very fastidious about their fitness. Were you sort of in that same camp doing a ton of like off-court training and things like that, or were you mainly focused just specifically on playing rackets all the time? Like, how did your training go?
I didn't train that much to start with. I knew I had to be. I was never as good a squash player as Willie, but I played for the Queen's Club top team. I was playing a bit of squash. Didn't really play any tennis after that, really. It sort of one door closes, another door opens.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got the encouragement to think that I could be a good rackets player before I said, and I knew Howard was so fit. It was before I knew Willie Boone very well, because he was slightly older than I was and miles better when I was getting into the game. And so it was really only after getting involved in the under 24 tournaments that I thought, there's a chance. This isn't it. I mean, one of the great things about rackets and being a world champion, you've got to pick your sport, and there are only 10 people who play, so you've got a good chance to get to the top.
Strategy. I had the same strategy myself.
Well, you're ranked number 13 at the moment. I know. I've done my research, and definitely, I think I'm right in saying, the best homegrown US player.
Yeah, I think I was unfortunate that I couldn't play. I think, in basically any of the ranking tournaments last year. So, and
So you're higher
including
than
the
that.
US Open. So it went down from like, I think like maybe 9 or 10 to 13. So I
Yeah.
gotta get back out there
Get
and
back
fire
there.
up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting. I've listened to your talks and about gut and nylon. And the first time I played in the under 24s, I played Andrew Milne in the final, God rest his soul. He was meant to win the tournament. And I managed to get to 2 games all, best of 5. And I made the decision, it must have been just at the time when gut was going out and nylon was coming in. I made the decision to play the last game with gut.
So you
And not
switched from nylon to gut in the match?
in the last game, the 5th game. And I think that that helped me win that match. I really do. My recollection is that I've never forgotten that the last game I swapped, I had maybe 2 rackets with gut and or 3 rackets with nylon and 1 racket with gut. And I switched to get a bit more feel on the ball. It was new time of playing with nylon, and I put it down to that.
That's really interesting. One of the biggest things for me that's interested me is like how much the game has changed, and with the different, obviously the equipment's not that much different, but certainly has changed since the maybe the 20s to the 60s to the 90s and 2000s. And hearing about the difference in the way the game was played is very interesting to me. Would you serve or play differently with the gut versus the nylon, or were you just sort of doing the same thing and it was just a different feel on the racket?
Yeah, you just got a bit more feel what you were doing with it. I felt, because I like to have my rackets really, really tight. I think nylon's got better. I mean, I've got pretty strong views, and one of the things that I really hate hearing myself say is, in my day, we did this. In my day, because who the hell gives a flying what's it what I think? It's not necessarily relevant. But I do remember playing Willie Boone and his hammer serve that he's talked about.
Yeah.
And it was a fearsome serve. And the only way I found myself defending it, and I think it irritated him quite a lot, was virtually to stand on the service line to receive it. And if he was as strong as an ox, I mean, physically as strong as an ox, and if he teed off on a hammer serve and it didn't half kill somebody in the gallery, it would hit the front wall, the back wall, and sometimes it would go as a fault across the service line.
Wow.
And it would go that much a fault, that much maximum. These days, schoolboys can do that.
Yeah.
And is it the nylon? I don't think so. Is it the stiffness of the racket? Maybe a little. Or is it the ball?
Yeah.
And I heard Howard talk, I listened to it yesterday and today, about this new word he's invented for ramming.
The rammer.
Rammer. Yeah. I mean, to me, that is a horrible part of the game.
Yeah.
And Willie mentioned his great supporter and character, Tommy Pugh. Wonderful, wonderful. He was 100% on the Willie Boone camp. And I overheard him explaining about the game, and he said, "You've got to practice your skills." And I listened and thought, yeah, you know, of course he's right. You've got, if a ball goes on the back wall, you've got to kill it.
Yep.
You've got to make sure it's something you can do by yourself. It's easy to practice, but you've just got to do it. And it
Yep.
means that if you're putting away 9 out of 10, it's massively demoralizing for your opponent.
Yeah.
Now, with these shots that fly around at the speed they do, it's a winning shot, and
Yeah, if you can get a guy in the back of the court, and then you know, some guys are strong enough where they can just stick a guy in the back and then blast it, and if they hit hard enough, it's basically impossible to get because you just can't catch up to the ball.
And I don't think that's right. I mean, I think it's ugly. I think it's not really, I think it's horrible. And I think it's making the quality of the doubles game worse.
I agree. And I think, actually, to your point, part of the reason that James and Jonathan, I guess in my opinion, and objectively speaking, because of the results, are the best doubles team, is because I would say out of all the teams, those are the two guys that actually try to control the ball and that try to keep it short. And you don't see a whole lot of like absolute smashing going on. Now, every once in a while, Jonathan will throw in a hammer or down the middle or something like that. But for the most part, everything is short on the floor to a length.
Yeah.
And that's all that they preach, and that's all that James preaches as a coach.
Yeah, I'm 100% behind that. And as I say, I hate saying in my day because it's not relevant. And it's, you know, people think, well, you can't move anymore, so you can't get the fast balls, but it doesn't make for good viewing, I don't think.
Yeah, it makes the game more sloppy. You know, I think what the best rackets is good controlled, like up and down the walls. I think in singles, doubles, you know, you're hitting more angles, obviously, but you know, seeing stuff come off the back wall and flying all over the place just makes it chaotic. And you wind up getting, it's very like disjointed, and you get a lot of left. It's awkward to watch. But I think one of the good things now, at least from what I've experienced with the newest versions of the balls from the Gordon machine that Elmer is using in Chicago, is the set of Nigel Gordon balls that we have and had were very, very fast balls. Like in New York, quite frankly, they're probably too fast for the court. The balls that Elmer's making now are slightly slower, and they're perfect for the New York court. You know, they take cut, they're still quick, but they're, you know, bouncy. They're not going to fly around. It's a lot harder to like basically hammer someone off the court. I guess they just have to find that fine line between, you know, too fast and too slow, and making sure that the balls work on a slow court and a fast court or something like that.
Yeah, you can't have one ball for every chord. There's got to be some variation in it, because for the reasons you've just said.
Yeah, I think that's the question. You know, I've been talking since my conversation with Howard. We've been going back and forth via email about trying to get together maybe a committee or something to figure out a way to standardize a ball or balls, whether it's through one maker or multiple, and just having more finely tuned and better defined rules and regulations for the balls. Because I think, I guess as a new player, it's not as bad now because I've got some more experience, but as a new player going from court to court, playing, you know, you've got to adjust to the court. And in many cases, you're having to adjust to the different ball too for the last few years. And I mean, it just makes it a heck of a lot more difficult, and makes for, I guess, a worse quality game in many cases. So I think the more you can get similar things going, whether it's using slightly different balls but from the same manufacturer or whatever, I think, but also slowing it down slightly, I'd say would make for a better game, but not too much, because I think, you know,
no,
Certainly an exciting aspect of the game.
That's what it's all about, and to hit a rackets ball is one of the most wonderful feelings. When you connect properly, you forget all of the bad shots.
It's very addicting, that's for sure. So one of the things that I read a lot about rackets. I watch a lot of YouTube. I read the Aberdare book. I'm a sort of student of the history of the game. They mention in the book, I don't think I've ever actually seen you play rackets. We've played tennis before with each other, but they show your overhead serve in rackets. It looks like a bit of a tennis serve. Did that just come from like you messing around on court and hitting tennis serves or whatever, and then you realized that it worked really well? Or what was that?
Yeah, it was exactly that. My tennis career, lawn tennis career, was built around my serve, and quite frankly, very little else. I didn't have the consistency to play it from the back. I had a really good serve. My volley was moderate, and so I mean, my favorite surface was wood, which they don't even play on anymore.
Yeah.
Boards. And so I went into the rackets court one day and I thought I'm going to muck around and hit some slice serves.
Yeah.
And they worked unbelievably well.
Yeah.
And it did the opposite. By the time it hit the back wall, instead of going towards the server,
it kicks back into the sidewall.
Went back into the sidewall. If it hit the back wall full toss after hitting the sidewall, it just died.
Yep, goes straight down.
And it was fun. It was fun to do it. And that bloody match that I lost to Willie when I had 5 match points, I made him look really flat-footed with the serve, but when it came to those match points, could I reproduce it? Damn it, I couldn't.
Were you hitting that like every single time in those matches, or were you hitting a backhand serve a lot of time?
I was hitting, I mixed it up, but I would win, I don't know, 6 points running on that side by serving that serve. And it's very difficult to volley because it's moving around as it comes to you.
Yeah, it's curling.
And so when they changed the heating at Queen's, I think they put some heating in the gallery, front row of the gallery. That took a little edge off it, I think. Yeah. But at a time, it was a hell of a fun serve to do.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Pell at the Racket and Tennis Club can hit that serve too as a tennis player, and the only guy that actually figured it out and could handle it was Guy Devereaux, who's a lefty on that side. And I guess he had seen it so many times that he just basically started. Your brain tells you to stand in one place and move your feet into one place as the returner, and you know that the ball is going to go the opposite direction, and you have to like switch your brain off and just move your body. You may as well close your eyes as the returner.
Yeah, you've just got to stand still, actually.
Yeah.
You've got to stand still and wait for it, and then it sits up quite nice. Can sit up quite nicely.
It can, yeah. But it's extremely difficult. You obviously mentioned that match with Willie. That rivalry I had asked him about. It seems like you guys were like incredibly evenly matched, and went back and forth a ton. How much older was he than you, or is he than you?
I think about 3 years, maybe 2 3/4, around that.
So you guys were sort of coming up at the same time, I guess, and maybe he was a little bit ahead of you, and then presumably you started playing a heck of a lot more rackets and training more. Is that sort of what happened?
Yeah, I mean that final of the amateur that year was my first major final.
That was 79?
76.
76, okay.
76. In 77, Charles Hugh Williams beat Willie Boone in the final of the amateur, which was a phenomenal achievement, because it was rather like Arthur Ashe beating Connors.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Charles will mind me saying that. Wonderful, wonderful result. It was an incredible result. And then I think I won the Open in '77. And then the rivalry really kicked off, I think.
Yeah.
And it was.
You guys must have been in basically every single final, I assume, throughout most of the 80s, or at least most of the early 80s.
When we were competitive, yeah, it was pretty much just the two of us, which was great. And that's at that stage, I'd already started training. Never did any gym work, which, had I known then what I know now, I would have done some weights for sure.
Yeah.
And in those days, nobody really knew about high intensity interval training. The Swedes had that thing called fartlek, which was running, sprinting, walking,
jumping all over the place.
Yeah. And when I used to meet with a very, very, very dear friend of mine, or became a really good friend, and who's my supporter, whereas Tom Pugh was Willie's supporter. And we used to go around at 7 o'clock in the morning. We went round Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens 5 days a week.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
that made a huge difference. A huge difference. And I think, looking back, I'd never admitted at the time, but the rivalry was terrific for us.
Yeah.
Certainly I consider it. I mean, I didn't like it at the time at all, but it made us both better players. It had to.
Yeah.
And then of course the mental side comes in. And I would be interested to know about Willie Surtees's view on the mental side of the game, and Willie Boone's and all of them. What's the mental side? I spoke to you're a real tennis player, court tennis player, really good one. I spoke to Rob Fay, and I talked to him about the mental side, and he didn't give any sort of credence to it. But his mental strength is that the way he beat Camden in the last match.
Blasted him off the court.
Well, I mean, I put that down as one of the greatest sporting events ever.
It was amazing.
I mean, phenomenal mental strength. And he lost, what, 2 sets, 6-love, or in amongst that. And to me, that is a huge element of winning matches if it's very tight.
Yeah. I think, I mean, each of those guys having, I never saw Surtees or Boone play, but having talked to them, it seems to me like the one similarity that they had is just the confidence in themselves and their games. I mean, I heard Surtees, I think he said, I had the measure of Willie Boone. Just having that in the back of your mind, if you're going into a match with a guy who's close to your level and you're confident in your abilities, and you put in the time one way or another, that's that switch that you can flip in your head. It keeps you focused. It keeps you believing, whether you're having a good day or a bad day.
You can't just have the attitude. You've got to back it up. It's got to be
built. You definitely have to back it up.
It's got to be built on something.
Yep.
It's for me, it was always built on fitness.
Yep.
And mentally, it was built on fitness. Willie, Boone's, I've forgotten what I was going to say. But I mean, I think it's an absolutely crucial part of the game, because it's sort of accepted that both players are good players and can hit the ball and up and down, and that's the defining difference of a match.
Yeah, how long you can do it for. So, obviously the mental side, I think overcoming adversity too, and sticking with it. You had mentioned losing that match and then coming back, and I think you lost the one world championship to him. What was it, like 103 to 100 or something like that? Is that correct? Or no?
No, I don't think it. I don't think it. I think it was a catalogue of errors on my part, and I deferred. I delayed the match when I lost to him in 1984. I think definitely once, if not twice, because I had a bad back, and
Yep.
I kidded myself that I'd done the training, and I hadn't. I wasn't fit enough.
Yeah.
And he took every advantage of that. And 10 days before I played the match, James Mell hit me in the mouth with a ball returning serve.
Oof.
And the 12 stitches came out 3 days before the match. That is not an excuse. I'm not putting that forward as any excuse at all. I deserved to lose. I hadn't done the level of training. And as soon as that starts working its way into your mind,
Yep.
you've got no chance.
Yeah.
You've got no chance. And I think when I challenged back in 86, and Charles Williams said, "You're absolutely crazy to do it. Put yourself through it." I think I was fitter than Willie Boone for that match.
Yeah. And then
that was the one that went down to the wire.
That's okay. I got it. That was the closest one. So you beat him 6-4 in 81, lost 7-2, and then won 8-6. And the
6-4 was against Willie Surtees.
Sorry, Surtees, yeah. And that, I think, from the article that I read about that match, I think it must have been like in the New Yorker or something like that. It's online. And then Willie obviously mentioned, I think, did you lose in New York 4-2 and then win 4-love in Queens?
I lost in New York 4-2. I was very, very disappointed. You build yourself up, you go over there, you don't go over to lose. He was on his home court. He's such a good player. And I lost 4-2. Everybody said, that's an unbelievable result. You've done so well, but it didn't sink in.
Yeah.
And then sadly he got pulled a muscle, I think in the early week, part of the week.
Yeah.
And then he talked about that one shot.
Yes.
And I remember it, and I was really fit, and I think it was a short shot, and I don't think it was exactly as he said it was. I know I ran like crazy to pick up a short shot.
Yeah.
Just managed to get it, and it looped over his head and just went flat on
against the back wall, or was it?
The back wall.
Okay.
And that was a defining moment. It was I don't know when it was, but I do know that, that was lucky. That was lucky.
You got to get yourself to that moment. I think that's the point there.
Yeah.
And then 86 against Boone. Now, 88 was Male versus Boone. Did you retire after 86?
I did, because I was looking forward to playing James. I think it was still my right to choose Chicago. And in July 87, I had the meeting with Lacoste to take over the UK distribution of Lacoste in the UK. And that's a really serious brand. And I just thought, there's no way I can do both.
Yeah.
And so I retired. The 86 match, I've always worked on the basis that you cannot expect to play. The World Championship is such a wonderful gladiatorial spectacle, and it feels totally different from any other final of the British Open, American Open, whatever it is. The World Championship feels different. It's massively different, and it's such a great contest. I love the tradition that there is a possibility that the world champion, if the points are equal, can retain his title. I love that. But my whole game, my whole philosophy was to try to get my worst performance and my best performance as close together as I could.
Yep.
And because you can't expect under that pressure to perform at your very best. And we played 2 legs. Both of them lasted 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Jesus.
And I won the first one in New York 4-3. I was 3-2 up in the second leg.
Yeah.
I think. I was 11-1 down in that game. I rather like the 30s 1 point. I got one shot back, which I had didn't deserve to get back. Oh, well, I ran like hell to get a ball back.
Yeah.
Managed to get to about 11-8 down, and then I lost the game. So we're 3-all.
Yep.
Willie's serving, and I was 3 points ahead at that point.
Yep.
In a 14-game match, I was 3 points up. And Willie, as we all know, or you don't, but Willie is like a steamroller.
Yep.
And he went in, had a great serve, a tricky serve from the left-hand court and a very good forehand serve. He went 5-love up.
Okay, so now you're down.
And I started shaking. And I said to myself, I'm sure this is wrong. Well, it turned out it wasn't, but I said to myself, if you don't win another point, you've done unbelievably well. And it just calmed me down a bit. And I went to 7-5 up. I think I got to 12-8 up, and I threw my hands in the air. Of course, Tommy Pugh in the gallery said, "I've never seen anything like that before," but I knew that I couldn't lose
right
at that stage. And I actually went on to win that game, so I won 4-3 and 4-3. But I don't think the Rackets standard was that good.
Yeah.
But it was a real scrap, and I put it down as one of my best matches.
Yeah. Queens obviously seems like if you're talking about the gladiatorial aspect of the game, like the number one ring for everyone, it sounds like for just about all the world champions, at least for the Brits, because it sounds like
we played so much there.
That's the second leg too of the that's been the second leg of the world championship for, looking back, like almost all of the world championships up until, I'm actually looking now, I think every single one up until Detroit, when Billings just won in Detroit. So you get St. Paul's, I guess, was when Male beat Neil, but other than that, it's been Queens.
Yeah.
What was your favorite? I guess I assume that Queens must have been your favorite court in the UK. Was New York your favorite court in the US?
I mean, I don't really describe them as favorite courts because just being in the States and playing rackets is so fantastic for a Brit. And we'll come if we can, we'll come on to that in a minute. I found New York always tricky, a completely different court to other courts.
Yep.
The length you play in New York is probably more than a yard shorter than other courts.
I would say yes, except if you're hitting really hard with cut, and then you can get the ball incredibly deep.
And then it cuts straight down.
Yeah, but I would say for the most part, you're having to play the ball much shorter on the floor in New York.
Yeah, and it's a difficult court to serve on. It's a very true court. It's a tremendous court. I had lots of fun battles in New York. I've been fascinated by the way Willie Surtees served on New York. I was also interested in how Edward Allman served on New York.
What do they do?
On his forehand side. It's as though they've, well, I don't know how Eddie used to hold his racket, but it was I can't remember all the grips now in lawn tennis, but it was the hand is right behind the grip, and he sort of comes down almost vertical. Yep. And if you look at Willie Surtees' backhand serve,
yep,
it's the racket is pointing up a lot of the time.
Yep.
And to get the ball to cut down in New York is tough.
Yep.
But the US, the way you do tournaments, the way you provide entertainment, the stags, the dinner dances, the weekends are just fantastic for rackets and fantastic for the Brits to go over and experience how it can be done.
Yeah.
And the friendships that you make are just terrific. So I don't really think about courts. It's more the people and the fun and the experience. And we've tried to recreate that a little bit in UK, but it's funny. We can't get the young Brits to support. They'll spend their money going to the States to play rackets, but asking them to spend money in the UK for the entertainment is really quite tough. It's funny, but it's so important for the health of the game.
Absolutely. I guess that sort of brings me in a natural way to the question of, obviously for a very long time, the Brits have talked about trying to shorten the British Open and doing different things to try to attract more of the US players. What's your take on, the 2-week or just about 10-day period where they're playing the British Open singles and doubles? And do you think there's a point to ever trying to change that?
I think what you would have to sacrifice to do it is you'd have to sacrifice the opportunity for the top players to play best of 7 games.
Yeah, that's 100% true.
Which is, I'm always been quite keen that they shouldn't go into maybe a world championship with having never played a best of 7 match. However, does the semi-final have to be best of 7? Maybe not. To play best of 7 2 days running is just impossible. I think
if you're playing competitive matches, it's impossible.
I think we should shorten it as much as we possibly can to encourage the guys from your side to come over. you have a better chance of doing it with a weekend like the British Amateur. But of course, the British Amateur has lost its importance.
Yeah.
And of course, it counts against the United States Pros, can't that, because it's an amateur tournament. Maybe there's a way of shortening it, and then it's up to the challengers before any eliminators to organize some best of 7 practice.
Yeah. I would think that, the British Open historically for both in the finals at least has been best of 7. And I think just for the historicity of it, you want to keep it that way. But certainly, I mean, I'm biased as an American. I want to try to go over there, at least play the doubles, and enjoy it. But trying to take 10 or 12 or 14 days off is difficult, especially with a family. But, if they do wind up trying to do something where they do, best of 5 or whatever up until the semis, and then in a final best of 7, I can't imagine that too many people would balk at that.
I mean, I think we should try and desperately try to encourage the North Americans to come over and play in our tournaments. We always, that's the reason we always have our stag on the Friday night.
Yep.
That you can then you fly overnight on Thursday.
Yep.
As opposed to flying overnight on Wednesday.
Yep.
And I think I'm worried about the future of the British game. And I think it's got to be fun. That's what is vital. I think what the Majolnas have achieved. I don't think Mark Agate founded it all by himself, but he was the driving force in the early days of the Majolnas. What they have done for Rackets is, you can't put a value on it, I don't think.
Yeah.
And we have to protect that. I think it's quite tough for the young British amateur at the moment, with lots of pressures. And
yeah, I would say between business and expenses and everything like that, it's a difficult thing. But I think there's certainly a way to do it and to make it work for people. I think right now it's almost prohibitively like a financial decision prohibits a lot of people from becoming professionals. I was interested to hear your take on like the amateur versus professional game, and I had talked to Tom Billings about when he had approached the TNRA about potentially trying to become like a semi-professional, and get paid to travel around or something like that to cover costs as an amateur. What are your thoughts about being a pure amateur? Do you think that there's a place for something in between an amateur and a pro, or would you like to see it stay as it is now, and have a complete separation?
I think, it's a really difficult subject. I think Rackets is not a commercial game, really. I think the amateur status rules should be loosened, which I think they are being loosened. I think so long as the amateurs don't make a profit, I think the group of people that I would like to protect, and I think you've got to realize that in the UK, there's not a lot of money in the game.
Yep.
The pros are not well paid. I'm not talking about the stouts of the world who are so phenomenally good they win prize money in several sports. I'm talking about the teaching professionals at the schools.
Yeah.
And what my position has always been that we shouldn't in any way take away money from them to pay for a gifted amateur. And what is that gifted special amateur going to earn in a year out of this? £2,000, £3,000.
Not going to be a whole heck of a lot of money.
He's not going to give up his day job. And
No.
so yes, if he can raise some money to help him travel with his expenses, I personally have nothing against that, because it's been going on forever anyway.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form, yes.
In
100%.
some way, shape, or form. But it's really the schools and the teaching professionals at the schools, and the schools are looking at that person very, very closely when they're being replaced. And you know, the ideal thing is if a lawn tennis player comes and he's in charge of the coaching for the lawn tennis in the summer, rackets in the winter.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You then get, okay, we've got somebody who can hit a rackets ball perhaps, and he's a history master. Yeah, we'll hire him. Well, then the warning bells start. You know, this is a slippery slope. You know, when I went to Harrow, and I went 2 weeks ago to Roger Crosby's funeral. Roger Crosby at Harrow was not a master. He didn't have master status.
Yep.
And those two words that are talked about every other second in the now, pastoral care, those two words didn't exist when we went to school.
Yeah.
So to go down to the rackets court, to be with somebody who was fun, who you could say anything to, and the rackets players had a special bond with Roger and the rackets community of that school. And it was fun. And you went off and played matches, and you drove 3 hours to another school, and you'd probably end up in a pub somewhere, which you weren't meant to. And it was just part of, it was a really special group. And that's just a small microcosm of our game.
Yeah.
We all will do anything for a rackets player because we have this common bond.
Yeah.
With this crazy, fantastic sport we play. And so that's a really long, boring answer to your question. So I'm not against, I am against the payment of top amateurs.
I think, you know, to be called an amateur, you're not getting paid. I would think, you know, anyone would be. I guess from my perspective, and I know a lot of the conversations with the other top amateurs is, you know, how covering the expenses and what's okay and what's not okay. And I think a lot of the conversations that have been going on, you know, in those groups and with some of the other committees and things, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of them, to see if anything actually changes, or if, you know, a whole lot of talk is done and nothing changes. So, but I think the one thing that I would be concerned about is you definitely want to have, you need professionals, you need teaching professionals, and you need coaches at the schools, and need to take care of those guys financially. But you also want to make sure that, you know, there's some incentive for a good player like a Ben Costin to go into that job and to follow that path as a rackets pro, and, you know, make sure that they're not giving up, you know, a comfortable life or a somewhat comfortable life as a pro, you know, versus doing something else and just playing as an amateur. Because I think, you know, you always want to see top guys playing rackets at the top level and encouraging the game to grow, and more younger generations learning from good players and good teachers.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I guess, pro and amateur status, obviously the top guys in your day, sorry to say your day, but in the sort of 80s.
It's all right if you say it.
It's okay, good. They were all amateurs. And, I guess up until Neil Smith really, I guess it went from basically Jeffrey Atkins was an amateur, or was he a pro? He was an amateur. It went from basically Jim Deere, all amateurs at the time, up until Neil Smith. You bridged the gap from basically Surtees all the way to Smith, Mail, Foster, like that, I guess the early 2000s era. In your opinion, I think each of the guys had said Mail, in their opinion, was the guy in that era that was the top dog. Would you agree with that statement, or was one of the other guys, and obviously including yourself, did you feel like that they were the head and shoulders above the rest?
I think James Mail was a phenomenal player. I just like Howard. God, we'd be interested to see James Stout against James Mail. I think it would have been really interesting. I think James would have struggled with some of the balls he would have had to play at the back of the court.
James Stout would have struggled?
Sorry, James Mail.
Okay.
And yet, I think James Mail's competitiveness, his incredible ability with a backswing that was probably that long, it would have been interesting. But I think he was just a phenomenal, and his determination and his fitness and strength. You latterly, he doesn't hit the ball. A few years ago, he didn't hit the ball nearly as hard as he did, but he used to really hit the ball hard.
Yeah.
And he could straighten the ball incredibly well. And again, he served really good serve. And he didn't have an obvious weakness. James Stout doesn't have an obvious weakness. His serving, you say, has got much, much better.
Yeah.
And Willie Surtees didn't serve as well as his backhand, for instance. I don't think you'll mind me saying that. His forehand was slightly less effective than his backhand. My backhand was better than my forehand.
Yeah.
And then but he didn't. James Mail did not. They both didn't have weaknesses. Didn't have obvious weaknesses. And
it's a bit of a shame that they didn't, like, one of them wasn't 10 years older or 10 years younger, because that would have been great to watch. And it is too bad. Would you say, was Mail your favorite doubles partner to play with? I know you guys had a ton of success together.
I've had a few interesting doubles partners. It started with Mark Thatcher.
Yep.
The son of Margaret Thatcher, and who was he won the public school singles, and we won the doubles together. But I was second string, and I'd be lucky to get 7 points a game from him.
Really?
Yeah. And so that was fun. I then played with Charles Hugh Williams, who's my great friend, and that was great. And Charles is 11 years older than I am. So the one thing I learned by playing with Charles is to get a partner who's 11 years younger, and that's James Mail. So when Willie says he's 11 years older than James. He's not. He's probably 13 years or 14 years older.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful doubles partner to have, you know. But my God, is he tough as having a partner?
Really?
Oh God, I mean, yeah, yeah, really tough playing with him. I mean, the famous story you've probably heard 100 times. I mean, I'm much older than he is, and my standard rackets was dropping, and we were in the World Championship together. And I bet I'm the only world champion in a doubles to be told to stand on the door.
I haven't heard that story, no.
And I mean, we were having a miserable time, and it was my fault. And I'd lost a bit of confidence, and it's quite easy to lose confidence with James on the court. And we were getting to the end of the second game or something, and we were getting beaten pretty easily, and it was my fault. And James came over to me and said, why don't you stand on the door? And I sort of didn't really do anything, and I thought, bloody hell, I'm not going to stand on the door. So anyway, a few points later, we lost the game. Out we go in New York, this was. And
was this against Neil and Shannon, or who?
I think it must have been.
Yeah.
I think it must have been. And yeah. And so behind the court, he says, you know, I think you better stand on the door. So I said, okay. So I think we played 2 or 3 points with me literally standing on the door, not doing anything. And we gave up that plan pretty quickly, but we did lose. We lost pretty easily, I think.
Well, if that's any indication of the stout versus male, I guess, quality levels, I can tell you from having stood on the door myself with James Stout as my partner, he was capable of winning. And some of I was asked, I think one of the podcasts, we were talking about the best rackets matches we've ever watched or ever been a part of. Without question, the best rackets I've been a part of is playing 2-on-1 against Stout. And some of the best rackets I've watched is him playing 2-on-1 against other people. And when he was in the mood, I mean, Larkin and I were playing some of our best rackets. And if James decides to fire up, like it's, you know, against Neil and Larkin, me and Larkin, like whoever, doesn't matter. He'll chop anyone. And he did it at Billings and Owen too. When I got the cramp in the British Open in the semis for basically a full game, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't move at all. And he took over the court and did it himself. It was ridiculous.
Amazing. Anyway, so that, yeah. Well, when you get to the World Championship and he does the same, I've been there first.
I will, hopefully that happens, and hopefully I'll have the pleasure of standing on the door and watching him do his business. That would be fantastic. Well, this is sort of the end of our hour, John. I really appreciate the time for taking to do this. I'll be posting it probably tomorrow because I'm headed out to the Hamptons now to be with the rest of the Cipriano family.
Wonderful.
I'm hoping that I get to see you in person at one of these tournaments sooner rather than later.
I know it's long overdue, isn't it?
It certainly is.
But thank you very much. Thanks for asking me.
Cheers, John.
All the best. Bye-bye.